Imagine a world where the most sought-after medicine wasn't some exotic herb or synthetic marvel, but human remains, specifically ancient mummies. This isn't a macabre fairy tale or a scene from a horror film. For centuries, across Europe, people genuinely believed that eating ground-up mummies, yes, actual desiccated human bodies, could cure almost any ailment. But the horror deepens. Sometimes those mummies weren't ancient at all. Sometimes they were disturbingly fresh. How did this grotesque practice become a mainstream medical treatment? And what dark secrets did it hide? To understand this disturbing chapter in human history, we need to peel back the layers of time, much like unwrapping an ancient sarcophagus. The origins of this bizarre medicinal trend lie not in outright cannibalism, but in a strange and fascinating misconception that began with the word mumia. Originally, mumia referred not to the human body itself, but to bitumen, a tar-like substance found in regions like Persia. Ancient Persian doctors prescribed bitumen for its purported healing properties, believing it could stop bleeding and aid in digestion. Fast forward to the time of the ancient Egyptians, who perfected the art of mummification using resins and spices, and sometimes natural bitumen. When medieval Arab physicians encountered Egyptian mummies, they saw the dark, embalmed flesh, often permeated with bitumen or similar substances, and made a critical, though understandable, leap. They conflated the bitumen used in embalming with the mumia, described by Persian texts. Thus, the idea was born. The mummy was the medicine. This misinterpretation was amplified as knowledge spread across trade routes into Europe, carried by scholars and merchants. The belief took root that the mystical properties of the embalming process, combined with the extreme age of the remains, somehow imparted unparalleled curative powers. European apothecaries, always on the lookout for new and exotic remedies, latched on to this concept with fervor. They saw it as a potent and mysterious substance from a land of ancient wonders, promising cures where traditional herbal remedies failed. The stage was set for a medical practice that would span centuries and involve untold desecrations. As the demand for mumia grew in medieval Europe, particularly from the 12th century onwards, the supply chain began to stretch. Initially, genuine ancient Egyptian mummies, carefully exhumed from their tombs, were the primary source. These were not easy to come by. Arab merchants and later European adventurers and dealers would venture into the desolate sands of Egypt, often bribing local authorities or operating in secrecy to plunder tombs. The mummies would be painstakingly removed, often in pieces, then dried, ground into a powder, and shipped across the Mediterranean. This was a gruesome, labor-intensive process, and the price of mumia soared. It became a luxury item, reserved for the wealthy and desperate, sold in small, precious quantities by apothecaries who marketed it as a panacea for everything from headaches and epilepsy to bruising, internal bleeding, and even the dreaded plague. Every ailment, it seemed, could benefit from a dose of powdered pharaoh. The fascination with Egypt, coupled with a deep-seated desire for cures in a time of rampant disease and limited medical understanding, fueled this macabre market. Doctors like Paracelsus, a renowned and influential physician of the Renaissance, even endorsed the use of mumia, believing it contained a vital life force. His endorsement, among others, legitimized the practice, pushing it further into the medical mainstream. But as demand outstripped the availability of genuine ancient mummies, a dark innovation emerged: the creation of fake mummies. Grave robbers, realizing the immense profits to be made, began to cannibalize more recent burials. Bodies of recently deceased paupers, criminals, or those who died unnoticed, were dug up, embalmed crudely in the Egyptian style, often with asphalt or similar crude substances, then dried and passed off as genuine antiquities. This was a grisly deception, born of greed and a complete disregard for human dignity, but one that went largely undetected for centuries. The discerning apothecary or physician had little way of verifying the authenticity or antiquity of the dusty, ground-up powder they received. The practice escalated, becoming an open secret, a macabre industry thriving on superstition and desperation. By the 16th and 17th centuries, the trade was booming. Accounts from travelers like the French surgeon Ambroise Paré, who actually wrote about the practice in the late 16th century, reveal a disturbing reality. Paré, though a critic of the practice, observed its widespread acceptance. He noted that even kings and queens were routinely prescribed mumia. The sheer scale of the operation meant that countless human remains, both ancient and disturbingly recent, found their way into European stomachs. There's a chilling irony here. What began as a misinterpretation of bitumen evolved into a market for literal, often recently deceased, human flesh, sold under the guise of ancient medicine. The moral and ethical lines were not just blurred, they were obliterated. Now, for perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire saga. While the thought of consuming ancient mummies is horrifying enough, the reality sometimes dipped into genuine ghoulishness. As the centuries progressed, especially into the 17th and 18th centuries, the mumia trade evolved in increasingly grim ways. When even the supply of fake mummies became insufficient, or perhaps when criminals saw an even more direct route to profit, they started offering up bodies that were not even subjected to a rudimentary embalming or drying process. These were simply fresh corpses, dismembered, sometimes partially dried in the sun, and then passed off as medical-grade mumia. Dealers would sell these freshly desecrated bodies, sometimes even from newly executed criminals or hospital cadavers, often attempting to give them a dark, antique appearance with tar or other substances. It was a macabre cottage industry operating in the shadows of scientific curiosity and unchecked greed. What truly changed everything, however, was when some physicians, more observant or simply more disgusted than their peers, began to notice irregularities. The French physician Guy de la Fontaine, in 1564, was one of the first to expose the depth of the deception. He traveled to Alexandria, hoping to obtain some genuine mumia directly from the source. To his horror, he witnessed the process firsthand. He saw bodies that had been freshly butchered, then treated to mimic the appearance of ancient Egyptian mummies, complete with asphalt and a rough drying process. He documented that entire warehouses were filled with the remains of young men and women who had met recent, violent ends, all destined to be ground into medicine. These weren't pharaohs. These were ordinary people, recently deceased, who were being repurposed for a gruesome trade. The revelation sent shockwaves through the medical community, at least among the more ethically inclined. It wasn't just old, sacred remains. It was potentially any poor, unfortunate soul who had recently died. The idea that patients were inadvertently partaking in what amounted to cannibalism, consuming the flesh of individuals who may have only recently breathed their last, was a bridge too far for many. This exposure, coupled with a more advanced understanding of anatomy and pathology emerging from the Enlightenment, slowly began to chip away at the practice's legitimacy. Critics like Paré and de la Fontaine argued that consuming human remains, ancient or not, carried no real medicinal value and could even be harmful. They championed more empirical and evidence-based approaches to medicine. Slowly, generation by generation, the belief faded. By the 19th century, mumia was largely relegated to the realm of quackery, a gruesome curiosity rather than a respected remedy. The market dried up, and the dark trade in human remains for medicinal purposes finally ceased. To this day, the story of medicinal cannibalism, the eating of mummies, stands as one of the most bizarre and disturbing chapters in medical history. It's a stark reminder of humanity's desperate search for cures in the face of debilitating illness and deep ignorance, and how easily superstition, misinformation, and greed can intertwine. The practice highlights a time when the boundaries of ethics and science were vastly different, and the quest for extended life or relief from suffering could lead to the most macabre solutions imaginable. While we no longer consume human remains for medicine, the underlying human desire to cheat death, to find a miracle cure, remains as potent as ever. We simply express it through different and hopefully less grotesque avenues. The tale of mumia serves as a chilling historical footnote, a testament to the strange journeys of human belief and the enduring mysteries of our ancestors' attempts to conquer the ultimate unknown, mortality. If you're interested in other forgotten and equally unsettling medical practices from history, be sure to check out our next exploration into the bizarre world of ancient bloodletting for every ailment imaginable.